Greetings, my fellow little ghouls and goblins. I'm Tom, and welcome to Monster Gab, where we love to talk about all things horror. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about horror films that are suitable for kids. Quite often, especially more so when Halloween is drawing near, I get asked, Tom, my kids want to watch a real horror film. What do you recommend? But it's got to have no sex scenes, no blood and gore, and in some cases, not too scary. And I get it, they don't want to watch a kids film. There's only so many times you can palm them off with Hocus Pocus before they start complaining and saying, no, we want to watch a real horror film, one for grown-ups. There's nothing wrong with Hocus Pocus, by the way. So I've compiled a list of horror films that I think are suitable for kids, but I'm talking about kids in general, not necessarily your kids. At the end of the day, you are the parent, you make the executive decision. Bear in mind, there are grown adults who can't handle horror films. But then, what age are we talking here? 10 to 13? Or 6, 7 or 8 years old? Some people would say that children shouldn't watch horror films, and morally I would agree, but then how many of us watched horror films when we were kids? And we turned out alright, didn't we? Some of us. Anyway, the point is, I'm not taking any responsibility if you expose your kids to the films on my list and they end up traumatized. At the end of the day, you are the parent. And in no particular order, here is my list. The first film on my list isn't actually a horror film, but it has enough tension and panic in it that it could be deemed scary for younger audiences. And that film is War of the Worlds. Now, as much as I'd love to recommend the original from 1953 because it's an absolute classic, I don't think it will hold the attention of most modern kids quite as well as the 2005 remake, which is still a solid film in my opinion. Directed by Steven Spielberg and starring Tom Cruise, it's essentially an alien invasion movie, which is highly entertaining with some moments of horror. I would say for much younger children, this film could come across as scary. Next up on my list is Poltergeist from 1982, where a family home is tormented by evil spirits. A child ends up getting possessed and even taken away. A lot of menacing scenes do occur in this movie, and it sounds scarier than it actually is, but in my opinion, compared to other horror films, this one's pretty tame. Some of the special effects may appear dated, but it's still a good film and a very good introduction to horror for younger audiences. Now, in 2015, Poltergeist actually received a remake, which in my opinion is not as good as the original. I personally didn't like it. It's essentially a like-for-like remake, so I also didn't see the point in making this film. But going back to what I said about War of the Worlds, if your kids want to watch a slightly more modern adaptation of this story, then I suppose I could recommend it. But seriously guys, I would still try and get them to watch the original first. Next up on my list is Arachnophobia from 1990, starring Jeff Daniels. This is a bug film, or a creepy crawly film, and it's about a town's mass invasion of killer spiders. This is a comedy horror, meaning that it's fun and entertaining, but it's also intense, with some jump scares and some gruesome deaths too. Apparently there's a remake due for release, but the original is still a worthy watch. This next film on my list was recommended by Bryn from Horror Hands, which is currently one of my favourite YouTube channels. He's a collector of horror films with an impressive library. He's very knowledgeable when it comes to horror, and his content is incredibly insightful. Fellow horror fans, I highly recommend you check his channel out. It's called Horror Hands. I will leave a link in the description. Now, when I asked Bryn to recommend some films, I wasn't specific enough. When I said horror films that are suitable for kids, I meant not necessarily designed for kids. And that's my fault, Bryn, not yours. So his recommendations were more family-orientated films. However, one of those films really did strike a chord with me, and that film is Monster House from 2006. Yes, this is an animated film. Yes, this is a family-orientated film. And yes, it does have some funny, light-hearted moments. But it also has a huge undercurrent of dread, a morbid backstory, and some scenes that are really dark and creepy. Again, for much younger audiences, this film could appear scary. It's a wonderfully animated movie that can be enjoyed at any age, especially on Halloween night. Bryn, thank you so much for the recommendation. The next two films that I have on my list have a 12 age certificate here in the UK. Depending on how well your child handles horror, I would say anyone from the age of 10 years and up could watch these films. I've chosen The Others from 2001 and The Woman in Black from 2012. Going back to parents' requests for films to have no sex, no gore, and not too scary, I would say that these films don't have any sex or gore as far as I recall, but they may be deemed pretty scary by some. They are both ghost stories with very suited periodic settings, very suspenseful, a bit jumpy, and incredibly spooky. In fact, any adults watching this right now who haven't seen these films, don't let that age certificate put you off. They are scary movies. Go check them out. A film I have always recommended as a kid's introduction to horror, and still do, is The Gate from 1987. Some unsupervised kids who have a house to themselves for the weekend discover a hole in the backyard, which just so happens to be a gateway to hell. It could happen. Stay with me. When the family pet dies and they bury it in the same location, the demons below consider it a sacrificial offering, and all hell breaks loose. Quite literally. The main characters in this film are kids, making it easier for kids watching to relate to them. But listen folks, this film is completely insane, especially towards the end. And despite the age of it, the special effects are so good that they still hold up really well today. There may be some blood, I can't remember, but I wouldn't say that this film is gory. A bit gruesome perhaps. But it's all good fun. I love this movie. In fact, I may have to review it on this channel sometime. My final recommendation is probably a film that I would recommend the most, and that film is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, released in 2019. The movie opens on Halloween of 1968, and the majority of the film takes place just after, so you get real Halloween vibes throughout this movie. Really ideal for watching on said night. It's a coming-of-age film which stars a lot of teenagers, so again, any kids watching this may find it easier to connect with the characters. It's also a sort of anthology movie, meaning that a lot of horror-based events take place that are connected to the main storyline, which happens to be a supernatural one. There are some creepy moments and plenty of scenes with scares and unease, but as a whole I would say that this film is tame compared to other horror films of its type. But it's a good film with great characters and great storytelling, and less likely to traumatize anyone who's not used to horror movies. But when I say it's tame, don't think I'm dumbing this film down. Some kids may find this movie scary. So folks, those are my recommendations of horror films that I think are suitable for kids, should you have one of those things. Anyway, do you agree with the recommendations in my list, or do you disagree? Do you have some recommendations of your own? Please do let me know in the comment section down there. Anyway, that is all we've got time for in this episode, and until next time. I don't know who they are, but if you don't subscribe, they will get you. So make sure you are indeed subscribed. Click that notification bell so you don't miss out on any new video here on Monster Gab. Like the video if you did indeed like it. Leave a comment down there and share this with your friends. Thank you so much for stopping by. Take care. See you soon. Bye bye.